We've got some new autonomous world records this week in the FTC DECODE, and it's been broken by the same two teams twice right after another in the same qualifier. Let's take a look. Just because it's fast doesn't mean that it is actually faster. I'm Coach Pratt, and I've been teaching robotics and design for over a decade now, and I've mentored FTC teams to winning national championships. And today we're going to take a look at some new autonomous strategies that I'm seeing other teams going, and that's allowing them to make world records and then break their own world record by working really well with their team. We'll also take a look at some of the newer teams that are still continuing to design and iterate on the robot and how your team can match up against these. We'll talk about some general autonomous pathing, and at the very end, I've got something very special for you from one of the teams that I mentor as well. Oh, that's supposed to be at the end. So, first up, just a little bit of fun here from Metal Rebels and Mule Shoe Robotics here. They've got a little bit of an alley-oop in here. And it's fun seeing students just test out different things with their robots. So for instance, let's back up, just have a second there. They're going to take this robot in the back, shoot it into the front robot, and then allow it to still fire in. So this is, actually, I don't think there's anything in the rules that says that this isn't legal. It's clearly not a good strategy for winning. But what I do like about it is that it teaches the importance of just having a little bit of fun in that code and just seeing if you can do this kind of stuff. Because if you're capable of doing this, it does mean that you've got some more programming chops to be able to try some other stuff. And there's nothing wrong with doing a little bit of fun activities to be able to build up your robotics. So thanks for sharing that. I want to share out from the same team as well. It's great seeing their design iterate over time, and I like when teams are able to showcase their learning online in such a way that you can see how things are developing over time. So they start with just a simple concept of a compliant wheel, and then they end up with some boot kickers, a rubber band intake, and a compliant wheel all up at the top to be able to develop this kind of ramp concept that they're moving into to that previous shot. So I just want to give a shout out when teams do interesting things like this. Quite a bit out of Team 1979 here, but this is a good note to hear for teams that may be on the newer side of the spectrum and still inside their competitive season. And that when a lot of teams start seeing these really high advanced world records and things like that, I think it can be really easy to get discouraged pretty quickly. But also recognize that a lot of teams are still in this development stage, still working on the robots, still testing and making them functional up to this point, that you're not really alone in that space. And I think that's a great reminder for that. Next up, let's talk about some different autonomous pathings and some thoughts I have about how you can improve your own autonomous. We've got Little Potato Robotics here, 3592. We've featured them before in the past, and they've got a new autonomous pattern here for almost 16 artifacts, which is pretty impressive. One thing I want to focus on here during this autonomous section is the importance of teams focusing on consistency for their autonomous. So despite this robot having super high throughput, and shooting from an accurate same place and having nice accurate pickups on these things as well, occasionally it does seem to miss some of these artifacts as they're launching in. It's able to pick up 3, which is great, and it also moves off the launch line at the very end to be able to finish up with theirs as well. So I think it's really important for teams to be focusing on the consistency and thinking, why am I missing some of these shots? And it looks to me like, at least on this, for Little Potato Robot, it looks like it's, and I don't know if this is consistent over trials, but that last ball on a few of those shots end up missing. So perhaps we've got some sort of RPM calculations a little out, or we're feeding it a little fast for what our flywheel is capable of shooting at least at the start of your match. I want to talk about another autonomous here. This is from Dragon Robotics, Team 31836. They've got some nice little shooting here out of their tuner. However, they've got such a small chassis and such a small drive base for the mechanism that they actually end up coming up and off of the floor right there. And they're lifting themselves probably 5 centimeters off the ground there. And this is something that teams are going to have to be really concerned about. And it's a little bit hard for me to tell, but it looks to me like the reason that we are running into some of those issues is right there. And it looks like their battery is actually inside that little section. If you can get more of your weight down below on your robot and get your center of mass to the lowest section of your chassis that you can, I think you're less likely to have some of these tip issues. Same thing going with these wheels here. I wonder if you could have the wheels, instead of being in this section here, if you could push them out onto the other side of the U channel. There was a previous team that I've seen that take a U channel and they've just cut out with a Dremel the top of a piece of U channel from GoBuild It and mounted their wheels on the inside. That would allow you to instead get your wheels inside of this U channel, and that would make your robot a lot more stable. So something to consider when teams are thinking about center masses, particularly in this season when you have really small drivetrains. I've also got another team here looking at a nice spin-dexter autonomous, and I think the important thing here is it's just got really consistent patterns and really consistent paths. And having consistent shooting, I think prioritizing consistent 15 or consistent 12 over inconsistent 18, I think is the way to go for teams. They've clearly got a lot of different driver-based automations here where they're able to pick things up to show what is the next ball in that target. And then also their last point here, they also make sure that it is further along the line so that they're off that launch line, getting towards that ranking point for move. Because remember, on that move, particularly for regional champions as we start to move into this season, you need 21 points to be able to get the ranking point. And that means that you have to have, most likely, and the most common way of getting there is going to be both teams leaving the launch line during autonomous, and one team fully based and one team partially based. If you don't get out all of those, and that's the easiest way to get that, you're really going to struggle to be able to get that ranking point and move up in those qualifying terms. So I think that last little path here is something I really want to highlight from this team, and really good work on that. Next up here, we're going to start analyzing the world record that was broken in that autonomous. Now, I do apologize for this camera angle. It's a little bit shaky, so I'll try to slow it down as best I can. Same thing here. There is another pattern here from the Cube Robot channel. However, this is a point of view from the top of a robot's head, and I think it's not a great view to be able to analyze what it is. So I want you to take a look at the red team here for their autonomous, and let's take a look at what their autonomous record is here. So take a look at these two robots. Let's decide to analyze this first robot here in this match, and then we'll go back to that head angle so we can analyze the further robot in the back there. So let's take a look at what these pathings are going on. So I like that these teams have taken time to clearly have their autonomouses mesh well together, particularly in that first little bit, because I think that a lot of teams aren't going to notice that. And I want you to look at the timing between these two robots. So let's watch this first robot now. It comes out, it shoots, the bottom one pauses, first three in. Now the back robot's able to shoot the other three in. What some teams have been finding is that their artifacts are actually colliding with each other in the air, midair, as they're trying to launch some of these things in. And that can make things a little bit more challenging. So we're going to go ahead and have this other one is able to pick up that back spike marker. I think that's another really interesting way that teams are going to try to approach this. It looks like the back two are kind of reserved for the back robot, and the front two are more reserved for that front robot. It also seems that the front robot's deal is to be able to open up that gate so you can get more of those artifacts in. So this robot is capable of picking up from that corner, from that edge, which is excellent. And it looks like they're probably just following a simple path of just picking up three. It doesn't look like there's any sort of camera vision in here to know where artifacts are. And honestly, even if there is, there might be actually, because we did see that robot drift up a little bit up to the top. So there might actually be a bit of camera vision. But just having high cycle time seems to be really reliable as a way of getting a high score in autonomous, because we can see that this robot here has really high cycle times and also is able to get off that launch line at the very end, prioritizing that at the end. Same with that top robot. So just as a bit of review on that, this back robot has a high throughput. They're waiting for that back. They go up, they collect that second spike marker. They come up and grab that other spike marker at that other pass. And now they're simply just cycling into that corner and then grabbing some more, into that corner, and then grabbing some more, into that corner, and then grabbing some more. Some things that might help improve this robot on their scouting at this point is I'm not sure what pathing program they're using, but if they're using something like Pedro or Roadrunner, it looks like their drive tune might be a little bit aggressive, and they might need to actually decrease their braking strength so that they start braking down sooner. So we can see that their P control, or their proportional control on this, is quite high, because the goal is to shoot from here, but it actually overshoots by almost 15 centimeters and then it have to come back. And despite having a faster path, sometimes what can happen is, despite having a faster path overall, because you're overshooting 15 centimeters, the number of times that you move from a corner and back, that's 30 centimeters there and back on that overshoot section. So if we count up the number of times that it has to go forward and back, we can see just how much it has to cause that. So that's one forward and back. This is a second forward and back. And then let's keep going. This is now a third forward and back. This is now a fourth forward and back. This is now a fifth forward and back. And let's see if it does it one more time. Oh yeah, it does go. Oh no. So fifth is max. So if we're talking 30 centimeters across 5 different scenarios, that's 150 centimeters. And that is roughly the length of half of the actual field. So that's the length of 3 field tiles. If they could correct for some of that overcorrection or that proportional control that's slightly too high, it would actually allow them to not have to travel an additional half length of the field. And that may give them enough time to be able to get another cycle in before they move on. So some they consider that just because it's fast doesn't mean that it is actually faster. And that's something I've talked a lot about before in autonomous programs, is that slow is smooth and smooth becomes fast. And I think that really does apply in this concept of autonomous here. So after analyzing that excellent work from team 23222, let's go ahead and take a look at team 23641 and see their point of view from, I believe this is the same match as well. So let's take a look to see at what their autonomous pathing is doing. Particularly, we probably want to focus on how it is they're opening up on that gate. So they fire in 3, and then we see the other 3 that comes from the other robot. They grab this second spike marker in the back, and then they start to open up the gate. So that is the first gate open. They continue to launch in. They do the gate a second time so that their back partners still continue to grab some of those artifacts. They do the gate a third time so that back, but it looks like that last gate was not quite accurate in being opened up, and that is frustrating with some of these. And that's a fourth gate open. And then they grab the other 3 markers, and it looks like they unfortunately managed to open up that gate in the end. So had they not opened up that gate in the end, because that fifth gate open wasn't necessarily intentional, doesn't look like, they would have had another 3 artifacts in. It would have been 6 or 5 plus an additional 3. It would have been 8 total for their pattern, which is really impressive on this. And I do think it just goes to show something that I've been saying for a good chunk of the season now, is that you may be getting some pattern points, but overall, I think that higher throughput is going to end up actually winning some of these games. And despite that pattern being quite important at the end for the ranking point, it's still at the point now in regional championships that the pattern point isn't near as important in the autonomous section, because you can still get that pattern again later in teleup, enough to be able to get it up. That randomness with a full 9 classifier is probably enough points to kick you up and over that section as well. So that is something to consider for teams. Overall, super impressive pathing from this team 23641. And clearly there's a lot of cooperation and cooperation going on with their other teammate to be able to get that really impressive autonomous world record. And finally here, we've got from one of the teams that I mentor. Of course, I mentor 3 teams over in the Benelux region, 23014, 24090, and 32200 as well. They've got themselves a robot reveal. So let's take a look at some things that are coming up with one of my team's robots. And this is something I love about First. This is a lot better, I will say, if it is in time with music. And that's kind of a big thing with the robot reveals here, because I don't actually have the music to tune this in. But I'm super proud of what all of my teams have been able to accomplish this season. And I love this on First, is that not only is it just, or not about just robots, but there's also some other really impressive things going on, like some really great cinematography being filmed in dark rooms, things like that. Our team is now getting prepared and up at Benelux to compete with my other team that was able to also improve and make it into the Benelux this year, which was 24090 as well. So I'm really excited to see what both of the teams that I mentor are able to perform up at Benelux in a week's time. If you're looking for more robotics resources, CAD files, code snippets, things like that for robotics, you can consider joining my community down below. If you want to submit future resources or future ideas for FTC Fridays, you have some matches you want me to analyze, some robot intakes, things like that, there's a submission form I can take a look at as well. And as always, best of luck to you out there this season.